One of the things that I have been challenged with most of my life is coming into a healthy relationship with anger. There's two different ways that people can navigate anger. One way is that they explode. They're like a volcano, and words come out, or behaviors come out, or they're punching, or they're kicking, or they're acting in ways where the anger is like molten lava that's spewing out and burning everything and everyone around them. Another way that anger can manifest is by introjecting, by being squelched, by being stuffed into one's body and one's bone marrows and one's immune system and one's and having it be a self-destruct. And for me, I have had a kind of like tendency to internalize anger and collapse. And then I reach a threshold and then I explode. So the journey with anger is to learn how to hold a container so that we're not internalizing it and we're not exploding. Now, one of the things that was really helpful for me when I was living in the monastery was I was in the workshop, and there was this big, huge wood-burning stove that was a monster. It was made out of cast iron, and it was specifically designed by one of the monks so that you can open up the lid and you can throw a whole garbage can worth of burnable trash and then light it so that we could use it to get rid of the combustible material. And this thing was huge. You could put, a 6-foot-long trunk of wood in it, and, it was great. Because in England it was damp and it was cold, and I'd light up the fire and it would heat up the workshop, and that was really helpful. But that stove gave me a really helpful way of looking at this whole prospect of dealing with anger. And so when I would clean the paintbrushes, I'd save the turpentine, and then I'd keep the scraps of wood and the combustible material. And I'd go in the morning and I'd load up the fire and I'd open it up and I'd douse it with the terps and I'd light it, and it would like shake. It would be like an inferno, a monster, and sometimes the lower belly of it would turn red hot, and it was like shaking and hissing and steaming and like this dragon breathing fire. But it had a strong enough container so that the fire did not spill all over the floor and burn down the building. So one of the things that we need to learn when we're dealing with the anger that tends to express itself is how to find and build a container to hold it. How to actually create a precept container so that we are careful about hurting other people with our words or our actions, that we're not like volcanoes that spew our anger all over the place. And one of the things that's really helpful in doing that is learning how to manage energy in the body, learning how to hold it, learning how to move it, learning how to release it with the breath. Because anger can have a slow fuse, it can have a quick fuse, and after a particular threshold, usually it is so intense, it's actually incredibly hard to manage. So learning how to manage that intensity, to know what it feels like in the body and manage that intensity, is really helpful, so that one is not spewing it. Now, when you have the pattern like I do, where there's a tendency to internalize it, and then rather than have access to it as a strength, I collapse, then one needs to give permission to feel it and understand how the anger itself is an important ally in helping to create strong boundaries and give one the energy to engage and act. Now, for myself, over these years, the invitation, the permission to recognize that there's a healthy component of anger helps me shift from internalizing it to giving me access to it so that I can then utilize it in a way which is skillful. Now, how does this work And how does this efforts with anger help us in the path of engagement? Well, there's so many things that are going on in the world that are just mind-boggling, infuriating, bewildering, grief-stricken. And when we can touch what we love and the harm that we see happening to what we love and can feel outrage about that, just outrage about that, when we couple our skill and capacity to work with anger and to turn it into an ally, and then use it to help us generate energy, it supports us to engage. And when we have done that skillfully, so that we're not using our anger like a volcano to burn and to scorch and to humiliate and to harm, but to energize and to move through resistance, to not to be deterred, to mobilize, then we have transformed our anger from a force which potentially can be phenomenally destructive into a force which has tremendous potential for protection, protecting what we cherish most. It's really important to see that there is a way of turning anger, distilling out the harmful components of anger, and being left with the power of protection for that which we love most, want to protect the most.